What if the month you were born contains a psychological blueprint that's been secretly shaping every decision you've ever made? What if Carl Jung's most suppressed research revealed that your birth month doesn't just influence your personality, it actually determines the archetypal pattern your unconscious mind follows for your entire life? Here's what no one tells you. The month you entered this world activated specific neurological pathways in your developing brain that align with ancient archetypal energies. Jung discovered this connection during his years of studying the collective unconscious, but this research was buried because it challenged everything we thought we knew about human psychology. You know that feeling when you read your horoscope and think, this is nonsense, but then something deep inside you whispers, but what if it's not? That whisper isn't superstition. It's your unconscious mind recognizing something your rational mind refuses to accept. Jung called this the temporal imprint, and it's more real than you've been allowed to believe. The truth is, each month carries an archetypal signature that imprints itself onto your psyche at the moment of birth. This isn't about astrology, this is about depth psychology and the hidden patterns that govern human behavior. Jung spent decades mapping these connections, and what he discovered was so profound that it was deliberately suppressed by the academic establishment. If you've ever felt like there's something about your personality that you can't quite explain, something that feels ancient and familiar but also mysterious, you're about to understand why. Your birth month didn't just determine when you came into this world, it determined which archetypal pattern would become your psychological destiny. Haven't you noticed how people born in the same month often share similar psychological traits, even when they come from completely different backgrounds? Haven't you wondered why certain months seem to produce specific types of personalities? Jung discovered that this isn't coincidence, it's archetypal imprinting. But here's what's truly disturbing. Most people live their entire lives without ever understanding their birth month's psychological signature. They make decisions, form relationships, and choose careers based on surface-level understanding of themselves, never realizing they're operating from a deep archetypal pattern that was established before they could even speak. If you've ever felt like there's something about your personality that you can't quite explain, subscribe now because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about yourself. You're not imagining the strange connection you feel to your birth month. That subtle sense that somehow, the time you were born holds significance beyond what conventional psychology teaches. Your instincts are absolutely correct. Jung's research into what he called temporal archetypes validates everything you've intuitively suspected. The reason you've always felt drawn to certain patterns, certain types of people, certain life paths isn't random. Is because your unconscious mind is following a psychological blueprint that was activated the moment you took your first breath. This isn't mystical thinking. This is advanced depth psychology that explains why people born in the same month often share similar psychological structures. Jung discovered that each month corresponds to a specific archetypal pattern that becomes embedded in the developing psyche. These aren't personality traits. They're fundamental psychological orientations that shape how you process reality, form relationships, and make meaning from your experiences. The month you were born literally programmed your unconscious mind with a specific way of being human. Here's what Jung observed. People born in winter months tend to develop what he called introspective archetypes, psychological patterns oriented toward inner depth and contemplation. Spring births activate emergence archetypes, patterns focused on growth and new beginnings. Summer births create expansion archetypes, patterns driven by outward expression and connection. Fall births establish integration archetypes, patterns oriented toward wisdom and harvest. But it goes deeper than seasons. Jung mapped out 12 distinct archetypal patterns, each corresponding to a specific month, each carrying its own psychological signature. He found that understanding your birth month's archetypal pattern could unlock mysteries about your deepest motivations, your unconscious fears, and your authentic path to psychological wholeness. The academic establishment suppressed this research because it challenged the fundamental assumption that personality is entirely shaped by environment and genetics. Jung's temporal archetype theory suggested that there's a third factor, a cosmic timing that imprints archetypal patterns onto the developing psyche. This was too radical for mainstream psychology to accept. But Jung's private notes, only recently made available to researchers, reveal the depth of his conviction about these patterns. He wrote, "The month of birth is not arbitrary, it's an archetypal appointment with specific psychological destiny. Each soul enters at precisely the moment when the collective unconscious can most effectively imprint its intended pattern. You've always known there was something special about your birth month, something that felt more significant than mere coincidence. Jung's research proves that your intuition was right all along. Your birth month isn't just when you happen to be born, it's the archetypal key to understanding your deepest psychological nature. Like this video if you've ever felt a mysterious connection to your birth month that you couldn't rationally explain. Everything you've been taught about personality formation is incomplete. Modern psychology wants you to believe that your personality is shaped entirely by genetics and environment, nature and nurture. But Jung's suppressed research reveals a third factor that's been deliberately hidden from public understanding: archetypal imprinting. The reason mainstream psychology rejects the birth month connection isn't because it's unscientific. It's because accepting it would require completely restructuring everything we think we know about human development. Jung's temporal archetype theory suggests that consciousness itself is organized around cosmic timing, and that's too threatening to the materialist worldview that dominates academic psychology. Here's what they don't want you to understand. Your birth month corresponds to specific archetypal energies that were active in the collective unconscious at the moment of your birth. These energies don't just influence your personality, they actually structure how your unconscious mind processes reality. Jung discovered that people born in the same month share similar psychological patterns because they were imprinted with the same archetypal blueprint. But Jung went further. He found that each month corresponds to one of 12 fundamental archetypes that he called temporal guardians. These aren't abstract concepts. They're living psychological patterns that exist within the collective unconscious. When you're born, your individual unconscious becomes aligned with one of these temporal guardians, and that alignment shapes your entire psychological development. January births, for example, align with what Jung called the initiator archetype, a pattern oriented toward new beginnings and breakthrough experiences. February births connect to the visionary archetype, a pattern focused on innovative thinking and humanitarian ideals. March births activate the warrior archetype, a pattern driven by courage and pioneering spirit. Each month carries its own archetypal signature, its own psychological gifts, and its own shadow patterns. Jung found that understanding your birth month's archetype could predict not just your strengths, but also your likely areas of unconscious resistance and psychological challenge. The academic establishment suppressed this research because it implies that human consciousness is connected to larger cosmic patterns. This threatens the reductionist view that consciousness is nothing more than brain chemistry. Jung's temporal archetype theory suggests that consciousness is actually a cosmic phenomenon, and that individual psychology is part of a larger archetypal order. But here's what's truly revolutionary. Jung discovered that understanding your birth month's archetype isn't just intellectually interesting, it's psychologically transformative. When you align with your archetypal pattern, you access psychological resources that have been dormant your entire life. You stop fighting against your deepest nature and start living from your authentic archetypal essence. Modern psychology keeps you focused on fixing your problems and managing your symptoms. Jung's approach is completely different. It's about recognizing and embodying your archetypal patterns so fully that psychological wholeness becomes inevitable. Your birth month isn't a limitation. It's a doorway to your deepest psychological potential. Share your birth month in the comments below and tell me which aspects of your personality you've never been able to fully explain. Let's see if Jung's patterns hold true. Jung's most profound discovery wasn't just that birth months correspond to archetypes. It was that these archetypes are actually psychological inheritance patterns passed down through the collective unconscious. Each month represents a different way that the human psyche has learned to navigate existence over thousands of years of evolution. The temporal guardians Jung identified aren't abstract psychological concepts. They're living patterns of consciousness that have been refined through millennia of human experience. When you're born in a specific month, you're not just getting a random personality type, you're inheriting an ancient psychological wisdom that's been tested and perfected over countless generations. Here's how Jung mapped the 12 temporal archetypes. January, the initiator. Born during the darkest time of year, these individuals carry the archetypal pattern of breakthrough and new beginnings. Their psychological structure is oriented toward creating something from nothing, finding light in darkness, and initiating transformative experiences for themselves and others. February, the visionary. Emerging as light begins to return, These souls carry the archetype of innovation and humanitarian ideals. Their unconscious mind is structured around seeing possibilities that others miss and dedicating their lives to progressive visions of human potential. March, the warrior. Born as winter surrenders to spring, these individuals embody the archetype of courage and pioneering spirit. Their psychological pattern is oriented toward confronting challenges, breaking through barriers, and leading others into new territory. April, the creator. Emerging during the full flowering of spring, these souls carry the archetype of manifestation and artistic expression. Their unconscious mind is structured around bringing new forms of beauty and creativity into the world. May, the builder. Born during the peak of spring growth, these individuals embody the archetype of stability and persistent effort. Their psychological pattern is oriented toward creating lasting structures and reliable foundations for themselves and others. June, the connector. Emerging as spring transitions to summer, these souls carry the archetype of communication and relationship building. Their unconscious mind is structured around creating bridges between people and ideas. July, the nurturer. Born during the peak of summer abundance, these individuals embody the archetype of care and emotional depth. Their psychological pattern is oriented toward creating emotional safety and nurturing growth in others. August, the leader. Emerging during the height of summer power, these souls carry the archetype of authority and creative expression. Their unconscious mind is structured around inspiring others and manifesting their personal vision. September, the perfectionist. Born as summer transitions to fall, these individuals embody the archetype of discernment and service. Their psychological pattern is oriented toward refining and improving everything they touch. October, the harmonizer. Emerging during the balance of autumn equinox, these souls carry the archetype of relationship and aesthetic beauty. Their unconscious mind is structured around creating balance and harmony in all aspects of life. November, the transformer. Born during the deepest descent into darkness, these individuals embody the archetype of death and rebirth. Their psychological pattern is oriented toward facilitating profound transformations in themselves and others. December, the sage. Emerging during the return of light, these souls carry the archetype of wisdom and spiritual understanding. Their unconscious mind is structured around synthesizing knowledge and sharing deeper truths. Jung discovered that when people understand and embody their birth month's archetype, they experience what he called archetypal alignment, a state where their conscious goals become perfectly synchronized with their unconscious psychological pattern. This creates a level of psychological integration that most people never experience. The reason your birth month feels significant isn't superstition. It's because your unconscious mind recognizes its archetypal inheritance. You're not just a random collection of personality traits. You're a living expression of an ancient psychological pattern that has been refined through thousands of years of human experience. Tell me your birth month and which archetypal pattern resonates most deeply with your experience. I want to hear your story in the comments below. When people discover their birth month's archetypal pattern, something profound happens in their psychology. They stop trying to be someone they're not and start embodying who they've always been at the deepest level. Jung called this process archetypal individuation, the journey of becoming fully aligned with your psychological blueprint. Here's what Jung observed. Most people spend their entire lives fighting against their archetypal nature. They try to develop personality traits that aren't authentic to their birth month's pattern. They pursue goals that aren't aligned with their archetypal gifts. And they form relationships that don't honor their deepest psychological needs. This creates what Jung called archetypal discord, a state of perpetual inner conflict. But when someone discovers and embraces their birth month's archetype, everything changes. Their energy increases because they're no longer swimming against their psychological current. Their relationships improve because they're finally showing up as their authentic self. Their career becomes more fulfilling because they're using their natural archetypal gifts. Jung documented case after case of people who experienced complete life transformation simply by understanding and embodying their birth month's archetypal pattern. A January-born individual who had struggled with indecision for years suddenly found the courage to make breakthrough changes in their life. A July-born person who had been criticized for being too emotional learned to see their emotional depth as an archetypal gift rather than a personal flaw. The transformation isn't just personal, it's relational. When you embody your archetypal pattern, you give others permission to do the same. Jung found that understanding birth month archetypes could revolutionize relationships because people finally understood why they were drawn to certain individuals and why certain dynamics felt so familiar. But here's the most profound part. Jung discovered that each archetypal pattern carries both gifts and shadow elements. The same psychological structure that creates your greatest strengths also creates your most challenging patterns. When you understand your birth month's archetype, you can work with both the light and shadow aspects of your nature. For example, November-born individuals carry the transformer archetype, which gives them incredible ability to facilitate change and navigate transitions. But the shadow side of this pattern can manifest as destructive tendencies or addiction to crisis. When they understand their archetypal nature, they can channel their transformative energy constructively rather than destructively. Jung's research revealed that archetypal alignment isn't just about personal fulfillment, it's about psychological wholeness. When you're living in harmony with your birth month's pattern, you access psychological resources that have been dormant your entire life. You stop depleting yourself by trying to be someone you're not and start energizing yourself by expressing your authentic archetypal nature. The people who experience the most profound transformations are those who not only understand their own birth month's archetype but also learn to recognize and honor the archetypal patterns in others. Jung found that relationships become infinitely more harmonious when people understand that different birth months carry different archetypal gifts and challenges. Your birth month isn't just a date on the calendar, it's a doorway to psychological wholeness. When you align with your archetypal pattern, you don't just change your life, you become who you were always meant to be. Jung's research proves that this transformation is not only possible but inevitable for those who have the courage to embrace their deepest psychological nature. Take a moment right now to reflect on your birth month's archetype. How does it explain patterns in your life that you've never understood before? Share your insights in the comments. Jung's birth month research offers more than just psychological insight. It provides a practical framework for living in complete alignment with your deepest nature. When you understand your archetypal pattern, you can make decisions that honor your psychological blueprint rather than fighting against it. The integration process begins with what Jung called archetypal recognition, the moment when you see your birth month's pattern reflected in your actual life experiences. This isn't about forcing yourself to fit into a predetermined mold. It's about recognizing the psychological pattern that has been operating beneath your conscious awareness your entire life. Start by examining your most fulfilling experiences. Jung found that people's peak moments almost always align with their birth month's archetypal expression. A March-born individual will find their greatest satisfaction in situations that require courage and pioneering spirit. A September-born person will feel most alive when they're able to analyze, refine, and perfect something important. The next step is understanding your archetypal relationships. Jung discovered that certain birth month combinations create natural harmony while others create productive tension. Understanding these patterns can transform your relationships because you'll finally understand why you're drawn to certain types of people and why certain dynamics feel so familiar. But integration goes deeper than personal relationships. Jung found that each archetypal pattern carries specific gifts that the world needs. When you align with your birth month's archetype, you're not just fulfilling your personal potential, you're contributing your unique psychological gifts to the collective human experience. January-born individuals serve as initiators, helping groups and communities break through stagnation and embrace new possibilities. February-born people function as visionaries, showing others what's possible when we transcend current limitations. March-born individuals act as warriors, providing the courage and leadership needed to navigate challenging transitions. The integration process requires both understanding and embodiment. It's not enough to intellectually recognize your archetypal pattern. You must live it. Jung found that true integration happens when your conscious choices become perfectly aligned with your unconscious archetypal nature. This means making career decisions that honor your archetypal gifts, forming relationships that support your psychological pattern, and creating life structures that allow your deepest nature to flourish. When you're living in archetypal alignment, life becomes effortless because you're no longer swimming against your psychological current. Jung's research revealed that archetypal integration is not a destination but a continuous process of deepening alignment. As you mature, you discover new layers of your archetypal pattern and find increasingly sophisticated ways to express your psychological gifts. The most profound integration occurs when you understand that your birth month's archetype is not a limitation but a doorway to psychological wholeness. You're not trapped by your archetypal pattern, you're empowered by it. When you embrace your birth month's psychological blueprint, you access resources and capabilities that have been dormant your entire life. Your journey toward archetypal integration begins with a single recognition. The month you were born contains the key to understanding your deepest psychological nature. Jung's research provides the map, but the journey of integration is uniquely yours. If this resonates with you, subscribe and hit the notification bell because my next video reveals the specific psychological practices Jung developed for integrating your birth month's archetype into daily life. Jung's birth month research represents one of the most significant discoveries in the history of psychology, yet it remains largely unknown because it challenges everything we've been taught about human nature. The truth is, you are not a random collection of personality traits. You are a living expression of an ancient archetypal pattern that has been refined through millennia of human experience. Your birth month doesn't just influence your personality, it reveals your psychological destiny. When you understand and embody your archetypal pattern, you access a level of psychological wholeness that most people never experience. You stop trying to be someone you're not and start becoming who you've always been at the deepest level. The month you were born contains the key to unlocking your greatest psychological potential. Jung's research proves that this isn't mystical thinking. It's advanced depth psychology that explains why certain patterns feel so familiar and why certain paths feel so right. As you begin to explore your birth month's archetypal pattern, remember that this is not about limiting yourself. It's about recognizing the psychological blueprint that has been guiding your life from the very beginning. When you align with your archetypal nature, you don't become less than you are. You become more fully yourself than you've ever been. The people who experience the most profound transformations are those who have the courage to embrace their archetypal pattern completely. They stop apologizing for their psychological nature and start celebrating it. They stop trying to fit into other people's expectations and start living from their authentic archetypal essence. Jung's birth month research offers you a choice. You can continue living in archetypal discord, fighting against your deepest nature, or you can embrace archetypal alignment and access the psychological wholeness that is your birthright. The choice is yours, but the path to transformation is clear. Your birth month isn't just when you happen to be born, it's the archetypal key to understanding your deepest psychological nature. Jung's research provides the framework, but the journey of integration is uniquely yours. The question is, are you ready to discover who you were always meant to be? If you're ready to dive deeper into Jung's archetypal psychology, click the link in the description for my comprehensive guide to birth month archetypes. And don't forget to subscribe because my next video reveals the specific psychological practices Jung developed for complete archetypal integration. Your transformation starts now.